Hello everybody, we're going to be going over incremental models for DBT today. What are incremental models? Incremental models are a type of materialization that you could use within DBT to add incremental data to your models rather than loading the entire table as the materialization table would do. In the background, DBT is going to be running a insert or a merge statement rather than a create or replace statement that you would typically find when your materialization type is table. And the benefit is you're going to avoid having to reload the entire table every DBT run. Rather, you're just going to load the additional rows that don't already exist within your model. When should you use incremental models? You should use incremental models when your tables are taking too long to build, meaning your materialization equals table, and this is taking too long now. And this could be because your tables have gotten too large and it's taking more and more resources and more time in order to recreate or create and replace those tables. When should you not use incremental models? It's when your columns change often. And it's because if you're adding or taking away columns or changing the names, you're going to have to replace or recreate those tables anyways. So the incremental models don't really make sense here. Also, when your models rely on other rows for calculations or your values rely on other rows, then you probably don't want to use incremental models. I can explain this later with an example. All right, let's jump into our demo. So here I'm going to show you the select count star, just to show you that it's 100 rows that we're going to get. There it is. Then I'm just going to go change it back to the select star, show you that this works. It does, and now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this model so that our rows, our first 100 rows goes into our Snowflake database. And I can run just that single model by using the -m indicator. There it is, successful. Now let's go ahead and go to our Snowflake database and check if that data went through. There's our table, funnel data incremental. And let's query it just to make sure it's there. Perfect, there it is. Moving on to the next portion. Before we move on, actually, we're just going to do a count star real quick, just to make sure there's 100 rows. Yep, there's the 100. And then let's check our source data to make sure there's 100 in there, just to show you that they match up. There's the 100, so it matches. So now let's go ahead and add the next 100 rows to our source data right here. We'll load it in. Select my second file. Open it up. This is also 100 rows, by the way. Got to get rid of that header line. There it is, 100 more rows. Now let's go back to our DBT model, and then we'll change this to an incremental model so that we can load those additional incremental 100 rows. So let's make sure we have 100 here first. There it is, or 200, sorry, from the source data. And then now let's go to make it our incremental model. We're going to do that using the config materialized as incremental. Then we're going to add these Jinja commands, which states if this model is incremental, then go ahead and select these rows. And the clause I'll be doing to filter the new rows is based on the date. So whatever date is greater than the max date from the rows that already exist within the model. And how I reference the model to itself is using this special notation called this. And then we're going to have to end this statement. Save. And now if I run this, I should have the additional 100 rows that we just inserted into the source table. There it is. Those rows returned 100 rows. Now let's run our model again. and push the additional 100 rows back to our table within our snowflake. Let's wait for it to success. There we go. Let's go back to our snowflake database. And let's check if the data made it through. So now it should be a count 200. Perfect. Now I'm going to show you why using a window function within incremental models could potentially be a little challenging and not recommended. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to truncate this sample funnel data table so I can redo what we did with the incremental model. So truncate table. Oh, that's not right. Sample funnel data. Truncated. Correct. We're going to load in that first piece of data now. So we just have the first 100 rows right here. Next, I'm going to skip that first line, load that in. Awesome. 100 rows are loaded. We have 100 rows within this source data now. I went ahead and created a new model called Funnel Data Incremental Win. Win standing for window function. It's the exact same thing as this model we created earlier in our example, but except this time I added one difference, which is a simple window function calculating the average clicks over channels, right? And again, it is incremental. We can run this. Just to make sure it works, I'm going to put in full refresh. And this will just materialize it as a table. It imagines it runs it as the first time, right? It's going to be true. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And we can go ahead and run it real quick to see if it works. It will work. First 100 rows, which we just put into our table. So let's go ahead and run this. DBT run full data incremental win. That's correct. Before we run that, actually, let me show you the average clicks. 269, 275, 269, 640. There's going to be 3 different values for each channel. So 269, 275, and 640 are the values we're looking at. So these values are going to be inputted into our database after we run this. Go ahead and run that. It should say success. It's successful. Let's go check our Snowflake database. Let's refresh this. And we should have incremental win here. And I have some queries that I've already written out. Let's go look at this one. So now we can see the average clicks, 269, 275, and 640, right? Same thing we see over here, 269, 275, 640. But what happens if we insert another 100 rows of data for the incremental run? This is where we may start running into issues, and I'll show you here. Load data. This is our next 100 rows. Skip the first line. Done. Now we have 200 rows. Now look, this 269, 275, and 640 are calculated based on the first 100 rows of data. However, once we do this incremental load, this window function is going to calculate only on the incremental, which is not necessarily what we want for the table. So let's go ahead and run it again. Oops, sorry, this is still full refresh. Let's get rid of this. Save this, and now this should return to 100, just because it should not count the first 100 rows. Perfect. So now it's calculating based on the next 100 rows. So that's why we get different values for average clicks. 718, 177, and 188. So let's go ahead and run this. It'll input it into our database, success, and let's rerun this again. Now we should have 3 more values. There it is. So we have those 3 other values calculated based on the second 100 rows that were inputted. However, this, of course, may be problematic because we don't know which came from which incremental load, and what if we just wanted all of the average clicks by each channel. We don't want to duplicate these. And I can show you what that would look like in our first table, right? Without the window function, then we have these average clicks here. These should be our true values. However, because we're loading based on the window functions or based on the incremental load, then these are being calculated or recalculated for each load. And that's why it may be an issue. Okay, so that sums it up. What we learned today was what incremental models are, when should you use them, when you shouldn't use them, as well as how do you configure an incremental model with our demo. Thanks.